Good afternoon, and welcome to the Today's Dietitian webinar, How to Support Your Immune System During a Pandemic and Beyond. Today's Dietitian is the only independent magazine written specifically for registered dietitians and nutrition professionals. We're proud to be the recognized resource for practical, reliable, and interesting information for the dietetics industry. Before we start today's presentation, I have 2 points of housekeeping. First, in order to claim your CPE credit, you'll have to remain with us through the entire hour-long presentation. Second, at the end of the session, our presenter will be taking questions. If you have a question, type it in the question box in your control panel. We'll try to address as many questions as time allows. Today's webinar is brought to you with support from Fresh Avocados, Love One Today, a science-based food and wellness education program that encourages avocados in everyday healthy eating plans to help increase fruit and vegetable intake. Avocados are a delicious, heart-healthy, whole food source of antioxidants, naturally good fats, and are a good source of fiber. Access your complimentary health professional resources at loveonetoday.com/weight management. Today's presenter has the following relevant disclosures to report. She's a consultant to Fix Health. She certifies that no conflict of interest exists for this program. Stacy Kennedy, MPH, RD, LDN, CSO, is a nutrition and fitness expert, educator, and keynote speaker with 20-plus years experience helping individuals with their personal wellness and business development endeavors with the latest discoveries in nutrition science. Her career highlights include collaborating with the industry's top nutrition, food, supplement, and technology talent to pioneer programs, platforms, and products from the ground up that re-engineered healthy eating experiences and transformed how people approach their health. Stacy worked for 20 years as a senior clinician at Harvard Medical School teaching affiliate hospitals, mainly focused in oncology, and she also co-founded her own private practice, Wellness Guides, LLC. As a recognized thought leader and media personality, Stacy speaks all over the world on topics of nutrition science, cancer, gut health, weight loss, behavioral change, and entrepreneurship. And now I'd like to welcome Stacy Kennedy.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's wonderful to be here. I'm really appreciative to Today's Dietitian and to Fresh Avocados and to all of you, my colleagues and fellow dietitians. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. So happy St. Patrick's Day. It's kind of fitting. We're being sponsored by avocados, they're green. So I thought that was really fitting. And this topic is one that I know all of us have thought a lot about in terms of our own personal health, our family's health, and certainly for our clients and patients. These are questions that we get all the time. How to support our immune system from an evidence-based perspective, not just now as we're still facing COVID and also for in the future. So we're going to talk about quite a few things, and I'm excited to share all this information with you. So the objectives for today is to not just understand the nutrition, but also really how lifestyle habits impact our immune system. We're going to talk about understanding and how you can actually implement components of a healthy, balanced diet to support immunity for yourself and your clients. And of course, we're going to analyze the science and look at evidence-based research to really help inform those decisions so that when you are making recommendations, they're not only effective, but also safe. So it's not just nutrition, right? We know that there are many lifestyle habits that are going to have an influence on our immunity. So I just briefly wanted to cover some of these. And of course, none of this is a surprise to anybody in this audience, but you know, getting the message to our clients can be really, really helpful. So absolutely, smoking is a risk factor to compromise immunity. Alcohol, I think this has been a tough one for so many people during the pandemic. We've heard all about, you know, everything from mom wine culture to just, you know, the data showing such an increase in alcohol consumption. And so this is probably a really significant area that you're already working with your clients and patients around regulating and getting this amount back down. Food safety, another fun topic for dietitians, but one that is important at any time. So whether it is expiration dates, cooking temperatures, storage temperatures, we certainly want to be paying attention to anything that can impact immunity. And as far as weight management goes, there's certainly data showing that obesity is a risk factor for hospitalization and death due to COVID. And we know obesity can negatively impact immunity, meaning that it can weaken cellular function. However, as many dietitians practice nowadays, it isn't always about the actual BMI and body weight, but really being on that journey. So helping your patients, if they do meet criteria for obesity, to implement healthy eating, healthy exercise, and all these other components can really make a difference and be helpful. The other thing is, of course, getting vaccinated to help educate your immune system. We also want to take care of our mind and our body. So we know that sleep is absolutely crucial in terms of our immune system. In fact, when we're in that deep sleep, our immune system, our immune cells can really regenerate, they can boost up, they can help restore us. So like that repair and healing potential is really high during good sleep. So 7 to 9 hours a night is what's suggested for adults, and doing good sleep hygiene like less blue light and cell phones can be helpful. Getting at least 30 minutes of physical activity a day is also important for our immune system. Over-exercising is not. That can actually suppress your immune system. So we want to hit that sweet spot of moderate exercise between sedentary and excessive. Meditation, mindfulness is something that we can take action on to, again, support immunity and reduce stress. Connecting with others, so doing that in a safe way, the socialization is super important, and just finding other ways to de-stress and get joy into all of our days is absolutely essential. So now we're going to talk more about the components of a healthy diet that support immunity. And we're going to go through and we're going to talk about a variety of examples here, and we're going to analyze a lot of the science. All right, so first of all, let's think about the components of a balanced diet. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of specific nutrients that can help to support our immunity, I want to think about our eating patterns overall. So as we all know, it's really the big picture of our lifestyle and our eating patterns. I don't really try not to use that word diet. I really try to avoid that word now. It's such a four-letter word. So we think about our eating patterns in a more global sense, in an overarching sense, so that it's not one food, one nutrient, one moment in time. So one of the best ways to think about creating that healthy, balanced diet is the balanced plate. So there are a lot of versions of this type of graphic. This is a really nice one that we created for this webinar here. But essentially, you can use this method anywhere. You want about half of your plate to be fruits and vegetables. You want a quarter to be lean, protein-rich foods. Those can be plant-based, they can be animal-based. And then you want the other quarter to be fiber-rich carbohydrates like whole grains, or starchy vegetables could also fall into that category there. And each of these sections of the plate is going to offer an opportunity for getting immune-supporting nutrients that all work in different ways. So we know that we need protein to build immune cells. Our immune cells are made out of protein, so we absolutely need to be eating protein. We're going to talk a lot about nutrients that you'll find in fruits and vegetables in just a moment. But even with the whole grains, there are nutrients that are important, and just energy intake. Running in the red in terms of our overall energy intake is not helpful from an immune standpoint. So back to thinking about your clients and patients that are working on weight management, for many reasons, we don't want them to go about it in a restrictive or in a, undernourished format. And immunity would absolutely be one of those reasons to make sure they're feeding themselves adequately, not just for their metabolism, but for their immune system. So I find in practice, recently with COVID and the pandemic, that sharing that message around immunity sometimes is more helpful, right? Because our clients hear a lot of noise in the weight loss space. So tying it back to immunity, I find sometimes can be helpful. We talked about alcohol moderation. That's obviously an important part of a balanced diet. Limiting added sugars and ultra-processed foods. Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, I'm not saying clearly, don't eat anything out of a package, because we know that's not evidence-based, and I personally don't do that myself. But, one of the issues around ultra-processed food is just, we think of those classic junk foods, kind of, nutrient deplete, energy dense options. They're not going to help fuel our immune system, and added sugars can really be detrimental. So just, again, watching for those added sugar levels and looking to include plant-based proteins as often as possible. We know there are so many immune supportive vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals inherent to plant-based proteins, as well as for some people a little bit less inflammation if they're eating a high meat or processed meat diet. We want to emphasize that rainbow, what makes the tomato red, what makes the blueberry blue, what makes spinach green. These are all classes of phytonutrients that benefit our immune system and reduce inflammation with a variety of different actions. So eating the rainbow is such a fun technique to help get that diversity of immune supportive compounds and help your clients really enjoy doing that. And Mediterranean diets are rising to the top for many reasons, heart health as another. But in terms of immunity, we'll hear in just a moment, foods rich in omega-3 and a lot of the foods inherent to a Mediterranean diet are also immune supportive foods. So that can be a helpful mindset or framework to use with your clients and patients. So gut health, right? Gut health, we hear about it all the time, is a really important topic in terms of immunity. In fact, 70 to 80% of our immune cells live in our gut. It's such an important aspect. So we each have our own unique population, or like our own personal city of microbes that make up our personal microbiome. And so they can either contribute to imbalance and gas and bloating, mood issues, etc., or they can support gut health. So research has shown there are so many links to the integrity of our gut bacteria and our gut lining with a variety of chronic illnesses. So I've listed some of them here, but I think from an immune standpoint, we can approach gut health with our patients and clients and really help them understand this. We're not saying you should eat fruits and vegetables, because the dietitian told you to, wagging our finger in a judgy way. There are so many different reasons, and it's not just the vitamins. It is also that impact on our gut. And as we know, the research into gut health and immunity and really gut health and everything is scratching the surface. We're going to learn so much more in the next decade and beyond about this. So what can you do to support a healthy gut? None of this is rocket science for anybody who's here, but I do think revisiting this conversation frequently is very, very helpful. So we know that gut health can do all kinds of things besides helping immunity. So it can help curb cravings, manage our blood sugar levels, and regulate appetite, boost energy and mood. Super important during the pandemic. Fatigue and sadness, loneliness, depression, anxiety, mental illness, and just mental health challenges are all on the rise. So eating more fiber and supporting gut health can really help with that. Our overall health, reducing chronic illness risk, and clearly improving digestion, which is wonderful. So eating a diet rich in fiber, focusing on the diversity of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains are really important. So there are a lot of great sources of fiber, and really looking for those whole food sources or more naturally enhanced food products with fibers can be really helpful. So prebiotic fiber can help to feed the healthy bacteria that already live in our gut. And so prebiotic fiber, a lot of people take as various supplements, but we can get prebiotics from food. So found in like oats and apples, Brussels sprouts, artichokes, all kinds of fruits and veggies. Okay, I mentioned healthy fats. We talked about the Mediterranean diet as well. But healthy fats can be a really potent source of anti-inflammation and immune support. And it's kind of like two sides of the same coin, where unhealthy fats, and maybe we can come up with different terms, but for now, we can all know what I'm talking about. But other kinds of fats that are more common in the typical Western diet, those tend to be more promoting of inflammation. So certainly we should be reducing those ultra-processed foods and other sources of, common Western diet fats. However, moving the needle on boosting our immunity and reducing inflammation really can happen from a more inclusionary standpoint. And what I mean by that is when you're talking with your patients and clients, constantly focusing on that, you can't have this, don't do that. They're hearing all of that from the internet, from social media, from influencers, right? They want solutions from us. So while we certainly might say things like, I would recommend reducing, blah, 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 we really want to show up and really focus on what can you do? What can you do more of? And so that balance between not just omega-3 and omega-6, but, omega-3 or healthy fats like monos and these more processed or promoting of inflammation fats, getting more of the healthy fats is a great way to shift that balance, right? So it's not always a conversation of no and don't. There are a lot of yeses and a lot of wins, and this is really important for that mental well-being. And by the way, these healthy fats support mental wellness as well, so that's fantastic. But why are healthy fats important and why are they good for us? So they're very satiating. They help regulate hunger and fullness. Some actually offer electrolytes. So we'll highlight avocado. I love to use this one as an example, actually, because avocados are an excellent source of potassium, which is an electrolyte. So not like drinking avocado, you can put it in your smoothie. But when we talk about electrolytes, it's kind of more the idea that potassium is so important for energy, but also for blood pressure regulation as well. And so when we think of potassium-rich foods, if we were in a room right now, I'd say shout it out, and everybody would say banana. But there are a lot of other high potassium foods that we can turn to, like avocados, and they also have the healthy fats. So healthy fats give us more than that. There are other vitamins, minerals, and anti-inflammatory compounds that are really beneficial as well. And so, some of them, like salmon, might have protein too. But there are immunomodulatory effects specifically of omega-3 fats. So when we think about how and why this is true, and I actually found another review paper that was, kind of at the end of 2020, looking at what was going on specifically with COVID. So when we look at COVID infections, they kind of were describing that basically the host kind of has this overdrive of like your host immunity. And what that produces is a cytokine or an inflammatory storm in the body. And so omega-3 fat intake can actually help to reduce the storm that is happening. We know that omega-3 can, like EPA, DHA, can get into cell membranes. And when they get in, they actually can be beneficial because they're producing less pro-inflammatory mediators compared to fats typical in the Western diet. So they're going to have some more potency in terms of quieting that inflammatory storm that goes on. And so EPA and DHA specifically were shown to help regulate the immune system and potentially have antiviral effects. The flip side is true too, that a lack of omega-3 can alter the composition of cell membranes. So anyway, the bottom line is that getting more of these healthy fats can really help the immune system. I think our clients and patients and the public is rather well versed, well, maybe not, but in healthy fats helping our heart, for example. But I don't know that immunity is top of mind when we're reaching for, olives or nuts or nut butters. And so that is a great message to share with patients and clients to help them be more compliant with what you're asking them to do. All right, let's shift gears here, and we're going to dive into a lot of detail around specific vitamins and minerals that we know play an important role in our immune system. So vitamin C, no surprise, this is the first one we're going to talk about. It totally comes to mind. I mean, people were, looking into IV vitamin C, all kinds of stuff to help pump this into their body over the past year during the pandemic. Vitamin C, we know, is a really powerful antioxidant. It's important for skin, but it helps protect our cells from the damaging free radicals that exist in our environment, and it's absolutely essential for wound healing. been a lot of research showing that vitamin C intake can help reduce symptoms and shorten the duration and severity of many types of respiratory tract infections and the common cold, particularly in people who exercise. They have a slightly higher vitamin C requirement. People who smoke have a higher vitamin C requirement as well. So making sure they're getting adequate levels of this nutrient is going to be really important. We also know that during times of infection and stress, blood levels will decline rapidly. So, I mean, this past year has been super stressful for so many people. So even if somebody was not suffering from an infection, the stress is a real thing. So we want to help with that. So what are the guidelines? How do we get it? And where should we have some caution? And then I want to talk a little bit about COVID specifically. So I'm not sure if you're all aware, the reference on this slide is awesome, and there's one for like every nutrient from NIH. But there is also, NIH has put out specifically COVID treatment guidelines with regard to nutrients. So they have a whole page about vitamin C as related to COVID in terms of the strength of the evidence and what we really can or what we really should or shouldn't say in terms of recommending. So the bottom line, despite all the wonderful things that we know vitamin C does, according to the NIH, there is insufficient evidence to either recommend vitamin C like as a supplement or to discourage recommendations. So like totally nothing. I didn't get anything out of it other than they're not for, they're not against, they're like completely neutral on this one. Obviously, we want to make sure we get enough intake in our diet from food. The NIH page was a little bit more about supplementation. But they did talk about evidence related to the increased need during oxidative stress, that it has antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties, that it can influence both cellular immunity and vascular integrity. And we know with the pandemic that COVID really attacks the vascular system and can compromise that. So, bottom line is that vitamin C in your diet is clearly important. And so how much do you need? I put the guidelines up here and I put examples of food sources. Again, it's kind of a fun conversation with your clients and patients. Like, hey, did you know that there's more vitamin C in foods other than citrus, right? If you want to boost your vitamin C intake, it's not just lemons and oranges. Maybe they can't even have grapefruit, right? Let's look for other sources. So cauliflower is a great source. Kiwis are a great source. There are so many options besides just citrus. A lot of patients struggle with side effects, like I know in oncology, right? Somebody might be dealing with mouth sores or, other issues that would make citrus burn and hurt. What about supplements? Obviously more is not always better, but people are popping these things like candy and gum. So anywhere between 250 milligrams to 2,000 milligrams a day is considered safe. Clearly, when it comes to supplements, there are a lot of personalized factors. So you want your patient to check with their doctor. You want to be, as their dietitian, going through all of their medications and treatments to, make sure that the doses make sense and are safe for them. And over 1,000 milligrams at once can certainly cause GI upset. All right, our next superhero. Again, no surprises that we're talking about vitamin D. So much to say about vitamin D. For example, I could have put way more references on here too. There's just so much research going into it, which is great. So risk for cold and flu, we know is higher in people who don't get enough vitamin D from the sun or in their diet or from supplementation. And there's data, research from over 10,000 people finding anywhere from a 10 to 50% lower risk of infection, not specifically COVID, just infection in general, from those who supplement for diagnosed deficiency. That's a really key phrasing in this whole sentence here. Supplementing without a deficiency is different than supplementing with a deficiency. We want to correct all deficiencies. So we have receptors for vitamin D all throughout our body. It does a lot, inhibits enzymes involved in aging, so yay for that. And we know healthy blood levels may be beneficial in terms of reducing risk of certain kinds of cancers. And then the respiratory aspect is really interesting. Early data looking at COVID was studying the fact or showing the fact that severity of the COVID symptoms in people with blood levels of vitamin D was better than people who were deficient in vitamin D. So as far as guidelines go, there are actually quite a few all over the place, but I used the NIH ones for this. And I do want to share, again, just a little bit of research. So looking at specifically at COVID, again, we know that less deficiency is really helpful in terms of acute respiratory infections. And looking at a meta-analysis of 25 randomized trials with over 11,000 people, this I thought was really interesting. They found that a frequent daily dose of vitamin D for people who needed to supplement it was more effective in terms of looking at the immunity aspect than doing a bolus dose. So like a once a week mega dose for the immune system. For correcting vitamin D, they're both great. But for immunity, for respiratory benefits, this analysis was suggesting to address it by doing the daily dosing to replete instead of the bolus. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, maybe you just have more of the vitamin D available on a day-to-day basis. Maybe they take it more consistently, don't miss a dose. I don't really know why. The bottom line, again, was that we need more data around vitamin D and COVID, but that it does help with immunomodulation. So besides supplements, we get vitamin D from dairy products and from fortified non-dairy products like fortified, almond milks, etc. And also from food. So mushrooms are a great source, and then some fatty fish, which is already great for the omega-3s. And some people can get it from the sun, depending on where they live as well. Okay, so next up is zinc. We know zinc is an essential mineral that is required for immune cells to form and function properly. It is part of arming our primary defenses. They can heal damaged tissue and help to negate some harmful effects of certain bacteria. We also know that zinc deficiency can really impair wound healing and increase the risk of certain respiratory issues. And zinc deficiency is associated with a loss of taste and smell. So COVID, people can lose the sense of taste and smell as well. And zinc, it really facilitates a ton of enzyme functions for immunity, for protein synthesis, for wound healing. We need zinc to run so many enzymes to build and execute the enzyme functions that we need in our immune system. One of the things that's interesting about zinc is, again, really pushing that frequent consumption of it. Because the required daily intake, basically, we don't have good storage of zinc in our body. And so the taste and smell link and deficiency, sometimes can happen because we're just not eating it often enough. So again, the COVID treatment guidelines from NIH show there's not enough data to recommend supplementing above the RDA. So we should absolutely be encouraging patients and clients to eat zinc, rich foods in their diet. Here's some examples here. Super healthy options. Give us fiber, give us protein and other things. But we want them to at least get that recommended daily amount. And if they can't, or they're not, for whatever reason, in that case, you might want to consider supplementation. But the data around, just taking supplements of zinc to offset or reduce risk of COVID is not evidence-based. There's not enough data yet to recommend that. We do also know that zinc can enhance apoptosis or program cell death or cytotoxicity. So it can really be helpful in supporting our immune system and our defenses. Okay, selenium, another hero mineral that, many people don't get enough of in their daily diet. So selenium is a really important antioxidant. It is, just like zinc, a key component in vital mechanisms. So it is a compound found and needed as a cofactor in a number of mechanisms and for enzymes. So immune cell regulation is a big one with selenium. So people who are deficient in selenium or the selenoprotein, they do carry greater risk for inflammatory-related illnesses and immune-based illnesses as well. Again, not necessarily specifically COVID, but in general. Deficiency can also impair cardiovascular function and just overall increase infection risk. There are a lot of great sources of selenium in the diet. Brazil nuts are a great source. So like the dose of Brazil nuts in general to kind of get up to that 200 micrograms would be anywhere from 3 to 5 Brazil nuts a day. So you can kind of prescribe that as an intervention for some of your clients. I even recently found you can get Brazil nuts anywhere, right? Like you can get a whole bag of just Brazil nuts, and you can like put them in a smoothie. You can just eat them. You can crush them and put them on a salad. But it's a really great one to recommend for people because it's just easy. Seafood is really another great source of selenium, but some people are allergic or just don't like seafood, don't have access to it. The amount of selenium, particularly in plant-based foods, though, it really depends on how much selenium is in the soil. So, eating selenium-rich foods is important, but we do want to think about environmentalism and sustainability when it comes to making sure what we're eating actually is rich in selenium. So these are the recommendations here in terms of guidelines and limits. And in general, I would say I wouldn't really recommend more than 200. I would never recommend more than 200 micrograms, even from diet. So it would be hard to get like up, but 50 micrograms a day is a really great amount of selenium to go for as well. And you can get that just from some seafood or some Brazil nuts. All right, so let's take a look next here at magnesium. Actually, one last thing I did want to mention really quickly about selenium is that with aging, sometimes we need to, get a little bit more or just make sure that people are getting that in their diet. And we do store some selenium in our skeletal muscle, but testing for selenium really only reflects recent intake. But selenium does protect from oxidative damage and infections, and it can be important in terms of fertility and reproduction as well. All right, so now you know everything you ever need to know about selenium and zinc, but it's such a good one. All right, magnesium. Talking about magnesium all the time. I think I've heard and seen the most about magnesium with regard to sleep. And stress. So it's my last bullet point, but honestly, probably one of the most important ones here is that, it's estimated that kids and adults may not be getting sufficient amounts of magnesium in their diet. And we need magnesium to help promote sleep. We know sleep is really key for immunity. We also know magnesium can be calming and can help reduce stress and anxiety. And we know that those levels have been at, unprecedented highs. Whether it's the pandemic stress, unemployment, there's a whole variety of, missing seeing loved ones and family, a lot of reasons why stress and anxiety is high, and getting more magnesium into us through our diet can be a really helpful strategy. So magnesium deficiency is associated with weakened immunity and increased inflammation. You're hearing this theme over and over again. Immunity and inflammation kind of go hand in hand. Magnesium is required all throughout our body, including over 300 enzymes. Again, you're learning that these minerals, well, you've already learned this, but we're reminding ourselves that these minerals are really, really key for our enzyme reactions. And we need enzymes for so many different reasons, not just digesting our food. So it's really, really important that we have these cofactors and we have these components to optimize our health and wellness. And that's the way that I like to explain it to my clients and patients. They may not be deficient, right? But they may be suboptimal. And so how do we optimize our immunity? How do we optimize how we feel every day, our energy levels, our happiness? It isn't always about fixing something, totally preventing something. It's really about improvement, optimization, just better, not perfect, not, totally protected and immune to everything. It's about feeling and being just a little bit better. And so we also know that we need magnesium when we're building the proteins, including those that are required to make our immune cells. So we absolutely need magnesium as that building block. It's also required for glutathione production. So glutathione is an intracellular antioxidant that our body will make from other healthy foods that we are eating, like foods rich in magnesium. And so when we're looking for immunity, we want those antioxidants. building up your glutathione from intake is a really great strategy. We also know magnesium can help protect athletes from exercise-induced immune compromise. And so I mentioned earlier that overtraining, which is obviously a subjective measurement, overtraining is going to be different person to person, like overtraining with exercise. And it's going to be different in the same person at different times. But if you're pushing it too hard, if you're running yourself in the red with exercise, you are suppressing and compromising your immune system. You are more likely to get sick. So research has shown that in athletes who are obviously training hard, they need that magnesium. It's really important. So these are the intake guidelines of how much would be recommended per day and sources in our diet for magnesium. So again, there's not one eating pattern for everyone, and we want to meet all of our clients and patients where they're at and then help go on this journey with them towards improved wellness and optimization. But you may have clients and patients who are restricting or reducing the amount of carbs in their diet because they read they should, somebody told them to, they're looking at influencers, their doctor may have told them this. But when you're avoiding carbohydrates too much, you are also avoiding important nutrients like magnesium. You're going to find it in other things, green leafy vegetables, cashews, pumpkin seeds, molasses, but it's very prevalent in whole grains. So again, when you're talking with patients and clients about whole grains and their importance, we don't have to just talk about carbs for energy. We can talk about immunity from whole grains as well. And that might be something that is a little bit, just resonates with them or doesn't feel so oppositional to what they may be reading, hearing, and believing from peers or social media, right? So we want to kind of get them where they're going to listen to us. The other thing to mention just quickly about magnesium, right, is that our kidney really controls that magnesium balance in our body. And so excess alcohol intake is going to increase our excretion or how much magnesium is leaving our body after we have ingested it. So that's really something, again, you might use in conversation when discussing regulating alcohol intake with your clients because, saying well, drinking can cause all these problems. They're like, yeah, but it helps manage my stress or it's become a habit now. So when we can talk about not just alcohol and immunity, I don't know about each of you, but my clients will share with me often, they really like learning the why. They say once they know the why, it helps them want to do it more. And I agree. I mean, I'm the same way. I don't blame them. So you can share fun tidbits hey, well, alcohol actually causes you to eliminate more magnesium into your urine, and we need magnesium for our immune system. So when we talk about alcohol and immunity, I'm going to give you a specific reason why I feel like this is really important for you right now. So that's just kind of a quick example, but I did want to share that. The last thing was that a study at the end of 2020 looking at COVID did find that hospitalized patients who were over 50, controlling for blood pressure and other things, found that supplementing with vitamin D, magnesium, and B12, not in huge amounts actually, these patients did require less oxygen support and ICU support during their hospitalization. So again, it's nothing definitive. I already told you the NIH doesn't feel comfortable, recommending supplements across the board by any stretch. We really want to be focusing on intake, but it is interesting to just, know what's out there in terms of studying and really just helping our patients day to day. All right, let's flip and shift gears just a little bit about, okay, so now we learned about the things that we want to be up to speed on to advise and counsel our patients and clients and ourselves. Now I want to talk about what about market share and popularity. So what are our clients and patients hearing? What is their mindset when they come to meet with you, right? So number one, this is so obvious, but immunity, no shocker, is going up really high in terms of sales. So as a category for sales, and this is not just supplements, this would be protein powder, all kinds of things, anything you can imagine in the immunity space is up significantly from 2019, and it is projected to continue growing, although not as fast of a pace. Instagram, I just picked Instagram. I'm not really on TikTok, but I bet it's pretty rampant there and everywhere, and Facebook for sure. But up to 61% of Instagram posts studied featured immune boosting as a central idea. So more than half. So your patients and clients are bombarded with this. Also, specifically, immune cold flu support supplement sales are forecast to be about 4 million by next year. So Mintel, I don't know if you're familiar with Mintel. It's a really helpful research institution for industry data. So when I've worked at different CPG companies and things like that, we would use this all the time. But their study found the top 10 micronutrient supplements for immunity were many of the ones we just talked about. And it was also across other segments like food, beverage as well. And then herbal ingredients for immunity. I'm going to talk about some of these now. These were all the top ones. So this is really key because you want to know what your clients and patients are reading and hearing so that you can be informed and educated and really show up as that expert that you already are. So what about herbal remedies for immunity? And, these are the things, as I mentioned on the last slide, that everyone's talking about and looking at. So let's take a quick minute here to get ourselves up to speed on this. So Astragalus, it looks like a tongue depressor. It is a root that has a long history of use in Chinese medicine. It's gotten really popular with COVID for its immune supportive properties. It's best known as an anti-inflammatory and antibacterial. It's also native in Russia, Scandinavia. And in terms of research, though, there is just not a ton that is definitive at all. So we have a lot of preclinical studies. We've got animal research suggesting it could be helpful, but not enough to go start recommending it to everyone. But you can look it up and look to see if there are any interactions with medications your clients might be taking. And as long as they're taking a safe dose, whether or not it's fully effective, if it's safe for them, you might want to support them in their choices, but I'll leave that up to you. Echinacea, right? This is one people would take at the first sign of a cold. But echinacea clearly has gotten really popular with the pandemic. So it's typically consumed as a tea or as a supplement. It's native to North America. The dose range is pretty big, but this is what's generally shown as safe. And there's just historical use as a medicinal plant for boosting immunity and reducing effects of upper respiratory infections. It is recommended by WHO and in Germany and Canada, and there's no evidence related to COVID, though, or no solid evidence. There's some preliminary data showing maybe it helps reduce duration, severity, or even incidence of colds when used consistently. But again, this is one that you just want to, if your client's taking it, it's probably safe in these doses, but you just want to make sure there's no drug interactions. All right, here's things we can wrap our minds around a little bit more because we can eat these. You've probably got these ingredients in your kitchen right now. So ginger and honey go together really well. You can add lemon, but this might be something helpful when we think about immunity. So ginger has potent anti-inflammatory and antioxidant phytochemicals. Studies with ginger have shown some positive results. So reduced inflammation, particularly in people with inflammatory conditions like type 2 diabetes, and these studies were looking at TNF and like CRP levels. Oh my gosh, ginger shots, right, they're everywhere. And we've seen that growth. There's preclinical data looking at antiviral potency. Raw honey does have some antiseptic properties, and there is some prebiotics like in Manuka honey, but that's like a whole separate, I'm not recommending it as a brand. I just wanted to kind of mention that. But there's research, but I don't want to get into the whole company thing. But most research really on honey is in vitro, okay? So, but honey is a great thing to include in the diet in moderate amounts. It's still an added sugar, but getting some ginger and a little bit of honey might be something helpful and tasty. All right, turmeric and curcumin. So turmeric, like curcumin, like the active compounds, the curcuminoids. I didn't say that right. Curcuminoids in turmeric are the active components. So turmeric is a root. You can buy it at the store. It looks like ginger sort of on the outside, like that woody sort of texture. But then when you peel it and you shred it, it's bright orange, just like in the picture here on the inside. And you buy fresh turmeric. It's great to make a tea. You can put it in a smoothie. You could juice it. You can cook with it. It's awesome. It's not always easy to find. It might be expensive, so you can buy dried turmeric. But it's in the same family as ginger. It's native to India and Southeast Asia. And it is very potent in terms of its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant compounds, varying efficacy in terms of human trials. The pharmacokinetics can make it a bit challenging. Like the bioavailability can be pretty tough. It's highly variable, right? So, having the black pepper, the piperine that's in black pepper can help boost bioavailability because it essentially helps to address the rapid degradation that happens in the body. But like food doses in other parts of the world are like 2 to 4 tablespoons a day. I had a client ask me about this morning, and he was like, well, maybe I could, I'm going to start with a teaspoon, which I thought was great. But like in his mind, a teaspoon was going to be like a really high dose, and he was worried it was too much. Meanwhile, when we look at what other cultures are eating, it is a lot higher. But there's a lot of good stuff in turmeric, and I think there'll be more research coming around. So, you can just add it into all kinds of recipes. It's just a nice way to get started. But it can influence a lot of our immune cells and help down-regulate a lot of pro-inflammatory cytokines and maybe boost antibody responses. So it's definitely something that we should be paying attention to, and it's just something we can eat, so why not, right? Elderberry, this is consumed in ancient Egypt. It's very rich in the antioxidant anthocyanins, like blueberries, right? We can tell from this gorgeous, vibrant blue-purple color here. It's rich in flavonoids like quercetin, rutin, kaempferol that help to modulate inflammation. Again, more preclinical types of studies, right? It may help reduce duration of colds and flu. Again, there's not a lot of like hard evidence on that. The thing with the elderberry though is that this is what's challenging. I mean, they don't sell it in the grocery store, but you can't just go eat it. Like raw and underripe elderberry is actually toxic, and you should never eat the bark or the roots or the leaves. So typically in the U.S., because of this like issue around you can't just go pick it off a bush and eat it, we mostly consume it here as a tea, or as a syrup, sometimes as a supplement. It grows in the U.S. and in Europe. And what's interesting is that higher elevation, actually the concentration of the active compounds are even higher. Doses that are safe for adults, according to consumer labs, are listed here. And pro and prebiotics. I'm just going to mention beverages. Obviously, probiotics and prebiotics could be their own webinars. Each of those could be its own multi-series webinar, and it is. But in terms of beverages, in the beverage space, these are so hot right now, especially for immunity. So gut health focused, right? We know gut health is important for immunity. So you've got your kombuchas, which are probiotic. You've got your vinegars, which are supposed to help with gut health or reduce reflux, is kind of what people say. Shots and tonics, we mentioned, the rise of like the ginger shot and all the, all those turmeric shots and cayenne pepper, all kinds of things happening for that people are doing to help their immunity. Teas, a lot of beverages with teas, that may or may not also contain probiotics and prebiotics in them. And mushroom-based elixirs, that's really popular now. We know mushroom has high in vitamin D and can be helpful in terms of immunity. Mushrooms are great for immune support, and there are mushroom teas. There are mushrooms wrapped into pro and prebiotic products. There's mushroom coffee. There's mushroom jerky. There's mushroom everything out there now. And then, looking at other beverages like homemade juices, people are trying to do things like cleanse and detox, which we know is just a buzzword. Our body is doing that all the time, especially if we feed it these healthy, immune supportive foods. So, a lot of these items are things your clients and your patients are probably asking you about. All right, I want to make sure to leave a lot of time. We have such an amazing attendance, so we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A, but I want to kind of bring it all home for everyone and talk about how you can put all this into practice, right? We went through a lot of that during, but really this is where it comes down to, right, is what can you say, how can you really show up for your clients and patients? So there are many immune supportive foods with additional health and wellness benefits. We don't need to get locked into a hero superfood that's some kind of magic immune supportive food. There is a variety, and they do other things for us besides just support our immune system. So we're multitasking with eating a lot of these healthy foods on a regular basis. You want to help your clients include these foods in their daily eating patterns. You know, that vitamin D study about the daily dose versus the bolus dose is interesting. And I think, you know, we store certain nutrients. You know, we don't literally need to eat every single thing perfectly every single day, right? We all know that. But I do think that day-to-day basis of hitting the target at least of or towards the balanced plate is probably going to be really helpful. So help your clients, help them discover new recipes, right? Even better, what's even more effective, I find, is help them find how they can add these things into their favorite recipes. So can you chop up mushrooms and mix them into mac and cheese? Can you put cauliflower rice into your risotto to boost the vitamin C? Like, it's so much easier for people to take the additive approach or the dilution approach than like do something completely out of your comfort zone. So I find that focusing first on adding in to what you're already doing, I find to be a little bit more effective. Many immune supportive foods are simply regular foods in a regular diet and a regular eating pattern in other parts of the world. So they may be globally sourced, they might be enjoyed by cultures around the world. They're not necessarily miracle, magical, and they don't have to be supplements. These are foods that other cultures eat that we may also have access to. Supplements, as I've mentioned, can be included as part of a healthy eating pattern, but it's not your first choice. We absolutely want to go on a food-first approach. You want to use caution around dosing. Obviously, your client and patient has to talk to their doctor and their dietitian before starting something, and we have to be really, really, really detailed around those contraindications. Most importantly, I think, is maintaining an open mind. So thinking about your client and where they're coming from. And they're coming from where we're coming from. People are anxious to get back out there. People are anxious to get their vaccine. They're anxious for this to be over. They want to do everything they can to keep themselves and their family healthy. They're not doing this to be difficult. They're not trying to annoy you. Not that you all feel this way, but like, you know, you're going to get a lot of questions, and we just want to maintain an open mind. And if something is safe, but you don't know if it's proven to be effective, I feel like it's important to support your client and their goals and share with them, you know, transparently. But just because something isn't fully proven to be effective doesn't mean that your client shouldn't do it if it's safe. So just encourage them to be open with you and talk to you about these things and really help them separate fact from fiction by educating yourself on what they are seeing. So even though it might feel like fingernails on a chalkboard, look at some of these influencers, read some of these things, just so you know what your clients are seeing and hearing. All right, I want to open it up for questions. I would love to connect with each of you if you would like to. So please, if you have questions, if you have further thoughts or suggestions for me, I would love to hear them. You can visit my website. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can email me. So all of that information is here for you. So I'd love Leslie to help me with some of these questions. That would be great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stacy. That was awesome. So we have lots of questions. Let's start from the top and work our way down. I've sort of classified these in buckets as it relates to your PowerPoint. So kind of going back a little bit to the beginning of your session on immunity, lots of questions coming in on this one. So the main one that I received from a multitude of listeners, do you have any insight on the use of the phrase, quote unquote, boosting your immunity? So some RDs are adamant about not using this phrase because we can't really boost immunity or else it would cause a cytokine storm. I think you talked about that a little bit later on. But is it okay to use the phrase in our vernacular, or should we throw it out and replace it with support immunity or some variation thereof?
Oh, I love this question. And I know I use the word boosting immunity a couple times, but kind of intentionally because that's how your clients and patients will talk about it. But yeah, the writers of this question are 100% correct. We cannot, quote, boost our immune system, and we don't want to because that would, you know, start this whole flood of the cytokine storm. But in marketing language, boosting is just a big word. But in scientific, so like in blog writing, anything you're going to publish, you would want to say support. Support the immune system is a much more accurate and a much more evidence-based and frankly, just a safer kind of term to use. So I would always use supporting immunity, but you might use boosting if you're talking about what they're hearing. So like if you put up a social media post or you're like saying to your client, you know, something like, hey, you might be hearing about boosting your immunity. Let's unpack that together. We can support our immune system through, you know, eating a balanced diet, et cetera, right? So you are all correct. It's supporting would be the accurate term.
Perfect. Okay, kind of switching gears a little bit on the immunity topic. Any research or information that you've read about immunity as it relates to meat analogs, which tend to be highly processed? So, you know, the plant-based burgers basically is what I'm thinking. I can't think of the name of the actual brand.
No, I know. Yeah, like the plant-based stuff.
Meat analogs versus whole foods or plant-based protein. So immunity as it relates to those two food items, meat analogs versus plant-based. What do you recommend, or what do you know about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I have not seen any studies in particular, like looking at the meat analogs, you know, specifically on immunity. I think that would be really interesting. I mean, I would think just scientifically that clearly your whole plant-based foods are going to be the preferred source, right? Those are going to be the highest in nutrients, and a lot of the meat analogs are highly processed. But I've recently, because I've been looking a lot of these up for different clients, have found that some are changing their ingredient list. So keep checking, like go back and look. And there are quite a few now. I was shocked that only have like not as much of a meat replacement. There were a couple like egg replacements. There were a couple things that only had like 3 ingredients and were like mung bean protein or myco, which is like a mushroom protein. So I would say it's a mixed bag. I would look at each product specifically, but I don't know of any research. The research is more on whole plant-based foods like tofu, beans, nuts, seeds, all those kinds of things.
Great, that makes sense. Okay, this was an interesting one that came up a couple times. Why are added sugars bad for the immune system? Is there a specific mechanism that, you know, you mentioned that due to added sugars, X happens because you're consuming them?
Yeah, it's really more of, again, like chronic, you know, it's not like, oh, it's my birthday, I ate a piece of cake, right? Like it's like chronic excessive intake of added sugars, like high sugar intake, we know drives up inflammation in our body, right? It's linked with many inflammatory chronic illnesses and insulin resistance and other, you know, like pathways and mechanisms that drive up inflammation. So the sort of immune component honestly has a bit more to do with inflammation than like, you know, sugar affecting your macrophages, for example. At least that's been my understanding from reading the research.
Okay, great. All right, let's shift now to vitamins and minerals, that section. Lots of questions on magnesium. The most common one that came in is, do you have a magnesium supplement that you recommend that has good absorption?
Oh, that's a good one. And of course, you know what I'm going to say already, which is that I can't endorse any specific brands right now. But yeah, I mean, I do feel like that is for all supplements, but definitely for magnesium. That's such an important question. And too much magnesium or poorly absorbed magnesium supplements, like if patients are having to take a lot of them, it can cause issues with gut health like diarrhea. So you do want to find a good quality product. I would really look at the individual client and try to understand like why their magnesium is low, right? Like, is it due to a drug that's like a medication that they're taking? Has their doctor done a blood test? There are different ones. So, you know, that might drive some of the, like the form that you're looking for. But I would just use resources like Consumer Labs or Natural Medicine database. I mean, I like to recommend specific brands that I know are like only available to health providers sometimes, or that are very like, you know, recommended by health professionals. So I get picky about brands, but the form kind of depends on the person and why they need magnesium, if that makes sense. But offline, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to go back and forth and chat about it.
Perfect. I was just about to say, contact Stacy. Okay, so let's shift into a couple questions on herbal remedies. We're running out of time, so I want to get a couple of these in if we can. The benefits of ginger and turmeric. Does the potency decrease when these items are cooked?
That's a really good question. The data does not suggest that, because like when the epidemiological data is like looking at cultures that are eating this, and that's where a lot of these studies come from, they are cooking with many cultures. You're drinking it as a tea, you're cooking with it. So this is a total educated guess. I'm going to guess no, just based on the research and really understanding, like with turmeric, I mentioned the black pepper, but even fat can help us absorb the curcumin as well. And so we're going to be, having fats with turmeric usually in the context of cooking. So I love that question. I'm going to look into that a little further. So feel free to reach out to me, but I want to say no, but I need to look a little more.
Okay, great. All right, let's make this our last one because I think it's a really good one as it related to your summary slides. Do you have clients that are taking numerous supplements and or, herbal remedies, vitamins, minerals, everything basically you've addressed today? Do you have clients that are taking numerous of those? And if so, how do you counsel them? It can be overwhelming to keep track, know what the contraindications are. What do you tell those people?
So yes, and yes. I agree. It's really hard to keep track. There are a lot of contraindications, and I do try to start to move them away from so many supplements and start to look for food options. And actually, those clients tend to love like some of those new hot products I was telling you about. So, maybe you can try like a mushroom coffee instead of taking a supplement or something like that, right? So like looking for food and fun things they might want to branch out and try. But I ask every time we meet. So the way of like keeping track of it all, because they may not really be taking it, it may change. So every time we meet, I update in my own notes what they're actually taking, or I ask them to update it for me in whatever way we communicate with each other so that I know what's going on. And with my clients, especially like in this past year who are taking a lot of supplements, I spend a lot of time going through it with them, right? So we may spend like the entire first session we meet, or I'll bump it to the follow-up, literally talking about supplements. And sometimes with them, by the time, they don't want to be on all these things, right? So to be honest, sometimes when clients are taking so many supplements, they are just so afraid not to. So they need that why, they need that education, they need your help and support to give them permission and to give them a solution to move away from the ones that are not absolutely necessary. And I've had situations, just really quickly, where, they're taking all these supplements and like not taking vitamin D, and then they had a low blood level, a deficient level, in their latest doctor visit of vitamin D. So then sometimes it's a shift, like, I'm not against supplements, like I might say this to them, right? Like, I'm not against all supplements, but I noticed you're deficient in vitamin D. Let's prioritize that one, and let's maybe drop some of the other ones just for now and revisit it. So, I think it's a real back and forth conversation with them, and I don't argue with them. Like, if they really want to take things and they're safe for them, I'm not gonna, we're gonna just work on it over time. Gentle sunlight's gonna melt the strongest glacier in the world, right?
That's awesome. Yep, totally goes back to your last slide and putting it in practice with just listening and understanding what their point of view is. So that's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Stacy. That was a perfect wrap up in the ending there. Everybody was excited about today's webinar. We had a ton of registrants, lots of participants. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. This was really fun. It was really great to be here with everyone. Thank you.
We also want to thank Fresh Avocados Love One Today for supporting the Today's Dietitian audience through quality programming like the webinar you just experienced.
Instructions for credit claiming and downloading handouts should be up on your screen. You must complete a brief evaluation of the course in order to claim your credit and download your certificate. Registered dietitians should use code 175 when recording this activity in their professional development portfolio. If you are watching this webinar on our YouTube channel, please log into ce.todaysdietitian.com, click on the Webinars tab, and select this webinar in order to complete it for credit. If you are watching this webinar on our CE Learning Library website, click Next, or return to the course start page and select the evaluation step to complete this webinar for credit.